May I record too? I don't know how.
I'm not sure.
Later, you can share the file.
Yeah,
Okay.
later.
It was just a sort of security measure, but I think it should be fine. So, today, one notion of this living ideas group as well, I've explained that, you know, the cross-faculty notion of this group. Another idea of living ideas is that often when we give a paper, it's almost done. I mean, you know, sometimes we give an article that we've worked on so much, but we've polished the writing so much too. But I want our living ideas group also to welcome unfinished ideas. We can think together, you know. Now, this is a section from a chapter which I actually published in a book last year. This imperfectionist aesthetics in art and everyday life, and that was with Routledge 2023. And this is just one section from that. I've changed it and I've adapted it. When I published it, I almost didn't want to publish this as a section in the chapter, but I wanted to get it out there, you know. But actually my plan is to turn this into a short book or a much longer article, or even a couple of articles. It's the beginning of a theory of social value production and ethos creation, that sort of thing. So without further ado, I'll go on with the paper. The paper is it's called here a pentadic schema of ethics and aesthetics shaping ethos. The pentadic schema, don't worry about that word. Penta, just penta 5, like a pentagon 5. This is a schema. A schema is like a logical pattern, a pattern of words in an image or a diagram, but that helps us to think about something. So the pentadic, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's the schema basically. I mean, I'll fill it out with words a little later, but you know, that's here. Okay, so to begin, different aesthetics. What's aesthetics? You know, began even. Not just the study of beauty, but the study of all kinds of feelings that affect persons, groups, families, institutions, regions, nations, even worldwide movements. Yeah, or express different aesthetics. And these we can think of as expressing each aesthetic reflects a different kind of ethos or cultural atmosphere. In this paper, I'll give you my schematic theory of the production of culture and the shaping of values. I'm adapting, although I won't go into all the details in this talk, I'm adapting some 19th and even a little bit 18th century theories from people like Kant, Immanuel Kant, and Friedrich Schelling, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. I won't really go into those details because you don't need the history to get this. But these are ideas of logic and dialectic. You probably know dialectic from Hegel and Marx, you know, oppositions which in a way need each other and shape something beyond themselves. And this is the idea of the interpenetration of opposites. Opposites actually interpenetrate and go deep into the enemy camp, as it were, and influence each other. And somehow society advances by that dialectical zigzag. You know, history is never really a straight line. It's an often violent, but very much dialectical moving forwards. So this schema that I'm proposing, so in the 18th and 19th century, there were a few schemas a little bit like this, usually, you know, with a thesis and an antithesis, and, you know, coming together in a synthesis. And then that becomes a new thesis, etc. You know, that sort of thing. This scheme is a little bit different from that, but its background is in there. And the 19th century thinkers, you know, not like us today, with the faculties quite separated. In the 19th century, you could be a poet and a biologist, for example. Erasmus Darwin, you know, Charles Darwin's grandfather, was a biologist who actually had his own theory of evolution, just not one of natural selection, was also a poet. Samuel Taylor Coleridge was a poet, a very famous British romantic poet, but he was also a philosopher, a theologian, a newspaper writer, and he attended the natural science experiments, at the institution, and he was a friend of Sir Humphrey Davy. People were poets and scientists and humanities scholars all at the same time. We don't have that so much now, but hopefully this group is a little sign of that universitas. Don't just shout at each other across the wide gulf. Maybe money has done that. Poor mathematicians aren't getting much money because everyone thinks they just need a pencil. Natural scientists are getting all the expensive machines, and we in the humanities, we're getting math books and maybe the odd iPad. Okay. But the schema that I'm proposing applies to aesthetic creativity, which is a kind of expressive freedom. Freedom is a key word there. On one side, freedom, creativity, imagination, art, free thought. Breaking the rules is part of its rule, in a way, right? That's on one side. On the other side, you have things like ethics and rules and regulation, technical systems, bureaucracy, all of that.
If you don't mind, can I just write the keyword or something?
Sure.
Otherwise, for people, laymen like me, I cannot relate.
Yeah. So here, and I'll keep it brief,
Yes.
all the
That's fine.
synonyms and so on, you
Yes,
can
yes.
cluster around it, but I'm calling this side ethic. And what does that mean? That means the bureaucracy, the rules, the codification, the codes, the system, the logic, it's kind of left brain, right brain thing. Aesthetic, what's that? It's more freedom, breaking the rules in a way to get a creative higher rule or something like that. Imagination. Both of these are expressions of, I'm saying, and they are inspired by what I'm calling ideal value. Ideal value. So these are expressions. These are expressions of this. Ideal value, look, as well, there's a kind of mathematical niceness here. Ideal value is unitary. It's not divided. It's difficult to understand. Anything that can be divided can be analyzed and understood. Anything that is always pure and simple and unitary, you've got to know it. You can't really put it apart. You can't put it apart. If something is unitary, and whole, it has its own holism. You can't comprehend it with analysis and so on, right? So we humans, however, we know by cutting things apart and dividing the union and the disjunction, the opposition and the coming together of the ethic, the rules and the principles, and the aesthetic, the freedom and the imagination. The pushing apart and putting together of those is how we humans have a kind of handle or a kind of connection with ideal value. But ideal value on its own, that's you might call it Zen or something. How do you get there? Maybe Zazen, or maybe Ritsu Zen, or maybe contemplation or prayer, or different traditions have got their roots to ideal value. But I'll tell you one thing, you're never going to get an instruction manual telling you about it, or a textbook telling you about it. Whereas we easily get textbooks of aesthetics and ethic, okay? So here we have the division, and then we get our senses of ideal value from splitting up this pure value, as it were, this ideal value, into the sides of the rules and the freedom. Okay, so this ideal value inspires these two, and these are living branches, as it were, from this root. I'm saying in this theory here, they're kind of fighting each other in a way, but they're not contradictions or contraries. Words and sentences are contraries. They contradict each other. They cancel each other out. If I say the coffee is on the table, and you say the coffee is not on the table, one of us is right and one of us is wrong. Yeah. Whereas if I say, I love coffee, and then a minute later I say I hate coffee, they don't cancel each other out. They're forces, they're desires, they're realities. If something is a reality, it's not going to be contradicted in that way. It's an opposition. Opposition. You know this in the natural sciences too. Antagonist forces oppose each other, but they don't have to cancel each other out. They still exist in some sense. Okay. even if movement in this direction and an equal movement in that direction, then what you'll get is some kind of stasis, or stability, but they haven't disappeared. Okay? So in culture, as well as I've just said, in physics, opposites are real, they're not contraries. For one thing, to oppose another thing is not for one of them to lose and be destroyed. Rather, it's to present a different force or a different direction or perspective. Okay. Examples in the 19th century with those old thinkers included light, which disperses in all directions infinitely forever. And then its opposite, gravity, which converges into its central point. And so on. They were much interested in the negative poles of magnetism and the positive poles and electric current. Hemant.
Yeah, can I interrupt? I'm sorry. Just for my understanding. So what you mean to say is that the net effect of the ethic and aesthetics is the reality, or
no? I'll get in there. So it's ethos or ethos. It's the lived reality, but it's not the whole of reality. Another word for ethos, if you like, could be something like, or phrase, something like lived reality, the livable world, the tenable world. Nobody, not even your Van Gogh or Da Vinci, can be 100% artist all the time. He needs to have his rules set. Even they need their principles and their rules and their logic and so on. And sometimes for fleeting moments, they connect more fully with ideal value. I love that story of St. Thomas Aquinas, the Catholic theologian, who, after he'd written the entire Summa Theologia, I'm not sure if we could fit all of it in this room. No, we could. After he finished that, and he's very old and very corpulent, big guy. He was sitting and writing and eating. This big guy, St. Thomas Aquinas. And after he'd finished all of that, he stopped writing because he had some kind of mystical vision. He wasn't connected with the ideal value. And somebody asked him, why don't you continue writing on your Summa? He said, because after this vision, I've seen that the value of all of this that I've written, compared to that vision, this is all straw, kusa, grass, straw, nothing. So yeah, sometimes your rule person, your laws person, or your aesthetic person will also sometimes, of course, have connections with ideal value. You might only get it once in your life, or fleeting moments. Who knows? It's hard for us to comprehend. As I said in the beginning, its simplicity and purity makes analysis impossible. We can't even get a grip on it. If you do experience ideal value, people who experience it want to talk about it, whether you're a scientist like Einstein telling us about his visions, or or a religious person, or just an ordinary person with this beautiful moment. You feel like it exists out of time. You feel it's wrong to say it happened 4 months ago, or 4 years ago, or 4 decades. No, it somehow didn't quite end, but it lives in a different time. Or anyone who's experienced some connection, some deep connection, knows that the temporality, the sense of time is different when you connect with ideal value. What we do in our broken, fragmented, but beautiful world, we divide it up into its opposites, but opposites that need each other, not that cancel each other out. So, I'm still on page 1, sorry. Shook along a bit. So, I'm arguing that the aesthetic and the ethics of a community are interdependent poles. They absolutely need each other. And they're both expressions of this, the ideal value. The ethos arises at the center. I'm also saying, kind of just in passing now, something I'll maybe work on later. I should add here that number 5 is products. If you want to say stuff, physical expressions. You could even get artifacts, things that are made. The unitary value gets divided into these opposite forces, the aesthetic drive and the ethical drive. How do we get back to ideal value? Well, you can't go back to the womb and be born again. You can't do that. Once you're born, you're out. Same sort of thing with ideal value. When it's born, it comes out into these two halves. But how does it get synthesized again? How does it find its union? The mirror image of ideal value in our world, then, are the products that we make. If you look at our own society or different societies, sometimes that's quite sad. we get all these materialistic things that are designed to break quickly and so on. We have a bit of a broken reflection of ideal value. We are not seeing very purely. We are looking through a mirror very darkly, in a sense, where we are very primitive still, I think, according to this theory anyway. We're very primitive. There's not exactly a heaven on earth if you look at the kind of products that we are creating and the physical expressions and the artifacts we're leaving behind in our landfill and Gomibukuro, and this is our expression of ideal value at the moment. But there are shards of greatness and beauty and joy and miracle in it. Okay, so we have the ethos, which arises out of these two poles. In a way, although the products that we make are a kind of reflection of the ideal value, they are still obviously in opposition. Okay, imagine if there's a God, he wouldn't be very happy at the stuff in most of the supermarkets, or she wouldn't be very happy, that kind of thing. But ideal value is hardly perfectly reflected through us and our hands. It's not perfectly reflected in the products that we're making. And also, by products, I also mean social forms. So a family, a nuclear family, that's not exactly a biological thing, it's a social construct. Also, the Israeli kibbutz, that's another way of doing the family. And different tribes, matriarchal societies, you can still find some in rural China and so on, have different ways of expressing, small communities, the family. Their products too, social constructs, maybe I should add that basically, they're things that we construct. They're also expressions of ideal value through, how are they created? The bringing back together of aesthetic and ethic. Like imagine two magnets that are pointed in opposite directions. Grief, or like that Ghostbusters film when you cross the streams, don't cross the streams, when negative and positive come together and they can't. So what happens? Bang, an eruption of all this stuff that we make. And by stuff, it's not just the stuff in the supermarkets, it's the social constructs that we're making, the world that we're living in. And that all feeds back. Ideal value against the products, the ethic against the aesthetic, and vice versa, all converges in our life world. I'm calling it the ethos. That's the sense we make of our life. Sometimes it's messy and so on. Now, any society which represses one of these will be sick. Any society which suppresses products will have some kind of sickness, or suppresses the ethic, or suppresses free aesthetics. Just read Brave New World, which suppresses one part, or 1984, which maybe suppresses the aesthetic and the freedom. Some intensely secular kind of communism might suppress the idea of ideal value. So then that's weird, that's cutting the head off, Any society will have, no society is perfect. We've all got our imbalances. Materialistic UK or Japan or wherever, we have our problems somehow in an imbalance here. Okay, also, the shapers of an ethos, the people in charge, as it were, the shapers of an ethos usually learn that a good, productive aesthetic, sense of aesthetics creates a group identity. I mean, look what we've done here. We've got the little name tents for everybody. We always begin with a tea or a coffee. We've got snacks for later. Where living ideas. I've made a little mug for the speaker with. Oh, where is my tea? I don't know. Made a little mug for the speaker. Can you pass that for me, please? Oh, the mug. Oh, it's empty. Oh, I have some tea in that, please. People in the army know. The green tea, please. People in the army know that the polished boots and the polished brass buttons and the neat creases. It's not everybody's idea of masculinity, is it? Polishing shoes and cleaning your clothes. But that's hyper-masculinity in the sense that it's creating this neat, strict order with everything timed perfectly. And that creates the corps d'esprit, the spirit of the whole body. Thank you very much. I'm saying that no matter how strict and ethical and rule-bound you are, you can control people better, or you can keep a better order in the group if you have an aesthetic which matches, which rhymes with your ideas of the ethic. Yeah, the principles have an equal and opposite, as it were, aesthetic. Opposite not in a contradictory way, but just the other side, the opposite number. Okay, or think of Einstein with his fuzzy hair and not wearing a tie and his loose cardigan or jumper and kind of disheveled. He's become the role model for the typical academic. I'm sorry, I'm wearing a bit more like a bank manager or something. I should have put the tweed on today. But it does create an ethic. Does it make a difference when you put a tie on in the morning or not? Or what skirt you wear or something? Or am I going to wear pants today? Or, I mean, trousers, you know. Well, it makes a difference. You feel it, you live it. Culture is stuff that we walk. It's not just things that we read and so on. It's not just in the seminar room. Culture is the living, breathing stuff. Again, I'm getting back to living ideas. Or a rock concert, that has a uniform too. Ripped jeans, shaggy. You're breaking the rules if you come up like this to a rock concert, or like, you know. Okay, so for values, for principles and ideas on this side, for values up here, and for rules here, to take root in human life, they need, and this is the interdependence of opposites, they need an aesthetic. You can't just tell a lot of kids, but actually you can't tell a lot of university faculty a load of rules, even. You can't tell a bunch of workers rules. You have to have a feel that goes with it. You need an aesthetic. You need an aesthetic. Aesthetics is the root. This is kind of my slogan here. Aesthetics is the route through which meaning becomes felt. And the more abstract or high-minded your meaning, the more bodied and kind of concrete your aesthetics needs to be, or the stronger it needs to be. That's an educational principle. You get the kids to dance what they're learning before you hit them with books and so on. Okay, so in the paper we come to this schema, but I've drawn it up already. I'm just going to talk through the positions and then we're going to be finished. Ideal value, that's what we hope for, that's what we long for, that's what we contemplate. It can't be comprehended. In the past, people like Kant have said, God, freedom, the immortal soul. Well, not everybody believes in those nowadays, but other people have said, like Plato, truth, goodness, beauty. I'm not going to compromise with those. They're pure. They're ideal. You're not going to break them up and shape them in your dirty-handed little way. They're ideals. They're like sacrosanct. They're sacred for the scientist, even to this day. But Plato said not only truth, goodness, and beauty, the holy triad, as it were, of the scientist, but also piety. What's that, a cave name? You know, respect, courage, pleasure, even. There might be some ideal of that. The good life. These ideals are things that we aim for. And they're kind of related to virtues. John Keats said something like this in his hymn to Pan, the god of nature. He said, it's related to the unimaginable lodge for solitary thinkings, such as dodge, conception, to the very bourne of heaven, then leave the naked brain. It's like the thoughts are so pure, like pure alcohol, that they will leave the vessel they're in. They go straight to heaven, as it were. You don't have to believe in heaven, guys. I'm just saying, this rarefied realm of the ideal value and ideas. You can kind of touch them, but you can't hold them because they'll evaporate, because they are sublime. They sublimate, as it were. Some philosophers don't even believe in ideal value. Plato and Platonists absolutely did. And you know, some philosophers don't even believe it. I'm thinking of Jeremy Bentham, right, the 18th and 19th century utilitarian, who said, you know, rights, the idea of rights is nonsense, you know, human rights and so. The idea of rights is nonsense. The idea of natural rights, he said, is nonsense on stilts, you know, stilts. It's crazy nonsense. There's a kind of materialist idea or a utilitarian idea, which says there is no ideal value. The communists went that far, you know, in China and in Russia and other places where there is no God, there is only the little red book. There are no, even these values, they're the ideology. As Marx said, you know, it's the superstructure which must be torn down. We only have the material stuff, men, blood, hands, soil, products, labor, nothing else, and everything is just built up from there. Well, I'm saying, whatever. Even if you're a Marxist, you can still get something from this theory because everybody has an ideology. There is always a cultural ideology. We need something to imagine, we need hope. Just some people think the hope is empty and there's nothing there. Other people say, no, there is value, like numbers. Mathematicians say, a lot of mathematicians are Platonists. I don't know whether you are, but they believe somehow in a reality that corresponds to their formula, etc. Ethic is the sphere of duty, action. It's rule-based. It's how the ideas and the principles of the ideal value become converted into rules. Okay? Yo-Yo Ma said, the cellist, the cello player, Yo-Yo Ma said, we must transcend as musicians, but not just anybody, but as musicians, he said, as technicians of our craft, we must transcend the technique. We must transcend technique. Ethic is all about technique, but we must transcend technique here, but also a bit here. Transcend technique to give meaning and sustenance to individuals and communities. That's what music is doing, he thinks. When you break the rules in a way, you don't just break them, you go beyond the rules to the essence of ideal value. That brings us to aesthetic. What is that? That's pleasure, inclination. Oh, I like it, I want it, give me some of that. It grooves. You know, you can't get your class energized if you don't have a little bit of groove, can you? You know, you've got to give them a bit of, but it's not a technique used by intelligent teachers. They, oh dear, I have to add a bit of groove so they understand my difficult form. No. If you don't have the groove, you don't get the thinking. You're not a genius if you don't have that groove in your own thought. If you don't have music in the soul, that's another way of putting it. And it's the music that Yo-Yo Ma was talking about, the kind that it has its technique, but it transcends it. But that leads me to, this looks like aesthetic is the good guy, aesthetic is the bad guy. No, they're equal opposites. I give them equal dignity, and so should you. Aesthetic. I've got an example I give my students sometimes. You often get a teenager says, Mum and Dad, for Christmas or birthday, can you get me a Fender Stratocaster guitar? They've got all this angst and feeling and love and joy and hatred and all these mixed up things that coexist. And they just think, I'll plug it in and sweet music will stream from my soul and I'll change the world. And what happens? A cacophony. It's horrible noise. And sometimes they just give up because they expected that beauty to flow from their fingers through the instrument and into the world. But no, you need your technique, guys. You need to go to school. You do need the books. You do need the practice. They are equal partners, absolutely. This guy's often the romantic hero, and this is like a strict mother making you do your homework. But you need both if you want to succeed. And by succeed, I mean connect with ideal value. In that sense, I think you've really lived if you've done that. Okay? Technique, then, on its own is just the code, but it's empty. Technique, ethic on its own is just empty and banal, meaningless. But again, aesthetic with all its passion and feeling is just the scream of a dog unless you train it, you know, unless you give it the rules and the principles. And it needs to contemplate the ideal value and study at the desk and the textbook too, to become useful to others. You can feel it yourself, but when you speak to another, you will have an inarticulate yawp, a noise. You turn that into poetry through technique. Again, the mathematics of it all. In the middle then, ethos. It's the crucible. That's an old word from old alchemy and chemistry. The melting pot where it all comes in. Crucible comes from that word cruce, which is cross. It's had a cross in the center. It's all mixing and melting in there. The essence of ideal value is its purity. The essence of ethic is its rule. The essence of aesthetic is its freedom and imagination. The essence of ethos is being mixed. Being mixed. You can call it in a negative way the compromises of living, but I see it as the melange, the what's that? The gumbo of life. The gumbo is that soup that you all mix it, all the good stuff and the bad stuff, but add a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of spice and it all, yeah, you can live it. Ethos is the living of it all, right? But of course, that isn't ready yet until number 5 comes in. We humans don't like to be crucified and torn apart. We like unity. There's a part of, okay, there may be some Freudian death drive where every single cell wants to scatter everywhere, the thanatos. Yeah, but hopefully bios, eros, unity wins. And therefore we get not just a sexual instinct, but we get a marriage. We get not just progeny, we get children in a family. Then we get a community. Then we get a society. Hopefully we get an international respect, where we're bloody far from that right now. What the aim here is, well, I'm talking about Friedrich Schiller a little bit, the harmony of duty, gimu you call it in Japanese, gimu, ethic, duty, on the one side, and inclination, desire, the groove, the music on the other. The harmony of those two is a very, again, mathematic thing. That's one of the ideals of ethos. And then finally, and I'll be finished soon, I'm sorry I've gone over time by a good stretch. The products, the stuff, the physical expressions, the artifacts, the social constructs. This Zoom group, during COVID, when people were having all kinds of groups and so on, these are all products and constructs, and much of it was joyous. We're discovering things that materialistic society had got rid of for a while, or suppressed. We yearned for community again, didn't we? And we found our ways, because life does. Embodied value. It's the reflection on the lower plane of ideal value. It doesn't look like it most of the time. That's because we're not great, we're not there, we're primitive. It doesn't look like it most of the time. It looks like some, ancient, I don't know, Babylonian kind of religion with its clay gods and bits of the heads are broken off and so on. That's what a lot of our material society looks like, I think. If you did some archaeology on it. But they reflect ideal value, however badly. There's beauty in there. There's shards of that ideal value, which is so rare. Isn't it interesting? The greatest value are those fleeting moments, which are somehow eternal at the same time, but fleeting. And yet we're surrounded by the products and the stuff and the physical expressions and the artifacts and all of that. Well, this reflects through the ethos, and these products are created by the bringing together of these powerful forces. So difficult to bring together that we need to bring in that 4-letter bad word, work, W-O-R-K. We need people to work if they're to do this, because really, a lot of people, academics, we probably love our research, we want to work, but maybe we're not working, we're playing. But you really need a lot of force to bring together these antagonistic, and yet they're in love. Well, it's love and hate at the same time. These forces, you bring them together and sparks fly out of their kind of explosion. Sometimes you can create a beautiful magnet with electricity, and the positive and negative potential difference creates, whoa, gigawatts. We can make some cool stuff. We haven't really created much beauty since maybe the Middle Ages, or maybe the Romantic era, or Impressionism was pretty good. We keep getting these wow movements that sweep over continents and even the world. But then as if that was too much hard work, we fall back again into these periods of slurry, But our job as university professors, what is it? It's to reflect ideal value through aesthetic and ethic, to create an ethos where the products should better reflect ideal value. How? By synthesizing the ethic and the aesthetic. That's about enough. You can get a copy of this. Let's move on. So the reason why I wanted to give this one, this is like a kind of a jazz riff on something that I've written already. I've changed it a bit, and I want to expand it. So I want to ask people in the audience, on Zoom, and in the room, if they have any examples, or if any of this sort of fits with what they sometimes think, or yeah, let's open up the floor. Who wants to be the chair? Hamada Sensei, do you want to field questions from people? Maybe I can turn this round so that if a speaker from Zoom comes, we can all see his or her face. I'll just make this large. Okay, so any questions? Maybe one from the room first, and then maybe open it up to Zoom. Thoughts, reflections, criticisms? I want to expand this a lot, so if anyone's got any examples or anything like that?
Yeah, please.
I have always one, but I'm not the most qualified to,
Ah,
talk about this.
no worries, yeah.
Maybe later, I'm
That's the
happy-
point where I
I'm
agree
happy
with
to
you.
be second.
Oh. Oh. Okay, people in Zoom land. Does anybody have a question? Can we hear the Zoom people yet?
Yes, I think, yeah.
Actually, I was monitoring it, so they're hearing your voice well.
Okay, good. Just say yes or no if you have a question in Zoom. Why can't we hear them?
Nobody's
Yeah,
responding.
no.
Okay, then I wanted to be the second one too.
Well, you can,
And I have to,
choose.
you have to pace down because I'm not the speaker of English. I have to speak slowly.
Fine, thank you.
And still some time to, gather up what you have presented to us. But let's start from the quotation of Yo-Yo Ma.
Okay.
Yo-Yo Ma is saying that as a musician, we transcend technique in order to seek out the truth in our world. In a way that gives meaning and sustenance to individuals and communities. And throughout your talk, I was reminded of this cultural thing about Native Americans. At the age of something, they recommended traditionally to go into the mountains to get visions.
Is this men and women, or young boys and young girls, or just the boys? I'm not sure.
I don't know, in the old times, it was just boys probably.
Right.
But anyway, so the point is that they have to be alone, apart from the community for a while.
Yeah.
And then to get the vision. So, and some people say that you have to be introvert to get some original ideas. And I think that is kind of connected to the ideal value that you have been talking about.
Yes, absolutely.
So on one hand, you need to be really alone, apart from the community, apart from the group. And that's why probably how you can transcend, quote, technique, unquote.
Yes.
But one thing that sounds contradictory in your talk was that you need technique,
Yeah.
in the ethics side or the other side, the society, the group, the materialistic world, how to convey the ideal ideas, values to, the public. You have some technique, you have education system. So it's kind of contradictory, on one hand, you have, artists have to transcend technique, but we need technique to convey what artists has, have found out.
Yeah.
So, or how education, I was been wondering, how education or academics can be located in your scheme?
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful apparent paradox, I think, there. And of course, I've been thinking about that quite a lot. I mean, I got this idea in 2017, and it was just one of those side ideas. I just let it gestate, on the side of my desk, and until I sort of put it together about a year or so ago. And the point is that, well, we're not looking. This pentat has 5 points, and as I said, any one point, any focus on any one point, that is total focus on one point, complete and sole on one point, will, unless it is later merged with, will be a failure, or as I said earlier, will be sick. It will be social sickness. So it's a fact of experience, and probably a kind of logical fact, I think, if we think about it, that connection with ideal value requires, at some point anyway, absolute solitude. As Ralph Waldo Emerson put it, the great American transcendental philosopher and literary writer in the middle to the end of the 19th century, he said, to get any kind of genius, any kind of connection with the truth, you need solitude. And I don't mean solitude of your books and study. You must quit the library. He's basically copying Wordsworth, the British Romantic philosopher, who said, one impulse from a vernal wood will teach you more of man, than all of the books and sages could. But Emerson said, you must quit that and go to nature. Your stars, replace your books with the stars. But then you can't convey anything. If you just go out and grow a beard or let your hair hang low, ladies with no beards, you'd be a man or woman of the woods. You would have the wisdom, the sagacity, the impulse, but you wouldn't be able to communicate it unless you've read your rhetoric and you've read your literature and your poetry and you've known something about history. You need it. So the point is, in a sense, when the pentad, when all five become so close together in a sense that it almost is a point, that's where you have to be. And we never are that. We're always hovering this dance, but that's beautiful, that's living. We're never completely still. So there's a time, just like the Hebrew Testament, or some people call it the Old Testament of the Bible says, there's a time for sowing and there's a time for reaping. There's a time for going out into the woods and sleeping under the stars. Usually that's a young man or a young woman or an adolescent. But there's also a time to come back and be a bureaucrat and work out the rules and help others work out the rules. But each time, if you're only solely doing that, you have to be able to only connect with the other points of the, as it were, the pentadic cross or star or however you want to pattern it. So the point of the pentad is to say, development requires stages, and stages require focus on a certain point at a time, whether it's psychoanalytic development or social development or creative artistic development. You go through these movements and stages. But if you become obsessed and that becomes the only thing, then you break, or then what you're making breaks, and it becomes violent or disruptive or harmful to oneself or harmful to others. And monomaniac, maniacal about one thing. And it doesn't have that harmony, which is what we're talking about. Grace and beauty require the harmony of the rules and the desire. And if you just stick on the one, you'll be inexpressive, or you'll be kind of fascistically crazy about rules. But thanks. There's a lot to think about that. And I'm going to follow up about the Native American rituals and so on. But question number 2 from the mathematician.
Okay.
Thank you, Shingo. Have you got a comeback on that, or?
Actually, I have another one, but.
No.
Number 3.
No, you go ahead.
No, so this is the very first time I'm attending, a non-mathematical. Specialist talk.
I mentioned math 3 times for you, but yeah.
Okay, thanks, But so in the humanities, how is it decided whether a novel work is valuable and it's a good stuff or complete utter nonsense?
Great question. I mean, think about Gregor Mendel. His work, he was a monk, the biologist, plant science botanist, and he's studying genetics in, 1870s, 1880s or something, or 1860s. It went unread for how many decades? 3 or 4, until it was picked up and it became part of the 20th century synthesis of neo-Darwinism, DNA and Mendel's genetics. Wow, we cracked it. Well, this guy's paper sat in some little journal, for decades. So even in the natural sciences, you don't always know. I mean, there's something similar, as a crude way of putting it is suck it and see. Give it a taste. The fruit is in the value of the fruit is in the eating of it. But more practically, I mean, does this theory apply? Am I wrong in some places? Probably, that's why, I want to disseminate it, spread the seeds out, get other people applying it to their problems and thoughts. Does it you know, it might be some schemas usually are neat and tidy. They don't always take care of all of the mess of life, you know, but sometimes they work pretty well. You apply it to the certain problems that you've been working on the last few years, for example, and see if, that tidies up something here, or that gives me something difficult to think about, but that might be the angle that I was needing or something. So it's very kind of pragmatic in a kind of try it and see, you know, but that doesn't mean it's false if it's not, you know, working, but it doesn't mean it's true if people like it either. It's pretty difficult. It's not like your falsification in science or that kind of.
Okay, but more concretely, when you have a paper, does it go through some kind of peer review?
You know, it
or
does, absolutely, yes.
Okay,
Any
so-
academic paper will go through peer review.
Okay, so there is peer review also, and
Yes.
so the reviewer should make a decision, you know,
Well,
whether
usually,
we accept this.
in the
paper
humanities-
or it's junk and just.
A good journal, a
So
good journal will
what
give you,
happens
a
then?
good journal, the editor will read it first. And if the editor thinks it's junk, they'll probably just throw it away,
That's rejected.
right? And then you get two, a good journal will have at least two, but usually it's not more than two. But a good journal will have two, a poor journal will have one. Okay, in my opinion of a poor journal, right? And yeah, that's how it will go. But that again, papers have been rejected since when they found, you know, something's not so original as it claimed to be, or there was but if there's a serious error in it, that's not always a good reason for rejecting a paper retrospectively. That you just have another paper that comes out and corrects it. That happens in the natural sciences and I think mathematics too. You know, some proof is not actually a proof. Doesn't mean your paper is rejected retroactively. It just means that's kind of wrong now, but we've moved on. But that's still part of the record of the advancement of human knowledge.
And a good paper also attract a lot of citations, as in, or.
Yeah, well, the thing is, in the natural science, I'm not sure about maths, but in the natural sciences, some good papers will have 30 authors, 12 authors, 11, 9, 8 authors, you know? You know that, yeah? You know, Nuthalapati et al, you know, and the list of et al will be a page and a half or something, sometimes. In the humanities, it's usually one, it's occasionally two. You can't really, like Shingo was saying, to get your originality kind of more in culture and humanities, you do kind of need that solitude in a way, but then you disseminate it in a group, yeah? But to co-author a humanities paper, it's going to be rare that you find such a like mind. But beauty, as I'm saying, this pentad is about the bringing together of opposites. It can be wonderful to co-author a paper. I've tried it, I've got a few in my, you know, files here that I've been working on with people a little bit. And one day I might, you know, publish them like that. But it tends to be stuff that rolls out of your fingers, as it were, and out of your leaving the naked brain, tends to be the soul work, you know. But as I said, there's all kinds of sickness that can come through by focusing on just the solitary part of the pentad. Yeah. Okay. Anybody in Zoom land? Are you there? Not sure. Okay, Shingo, you had another question.
I think that, you know, we can just.
Yoshiki Nakamura is here. Yeah, there are 10 people here.
Right.
Our philosopher, Naoaki Kitamura, he's here.
Yeah.
Naoaki, can you hear me? I'm just testing the concept of this Zoom meeting.
You can see the list of the applicants here.
Naoaki sensei, can you hear me? Have I muted him? I have to unmute. I'm gonna unmute everybody. Hamada sensei, can you help me unmute?
Yeah.
Hope you are not muted so far, right?
I apologize.
Yeah,
I'm
but you are hosted as well.
Nguyen Can. I'm asking to unmute, but I'm not sure if I'm clicking the button correct. I'm not good at Zoom, I'm afraid.
Hello, sorry.
Can, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good, good. I don't want to pressure you to see if you have a question. I mean, if you have a question, feel free. Hi,
Hello.
here's Can, our architect.
Yes, yes. Hello, hello.
Sorry for changing the last minute.
Mute the Zoom people, yeah.
No, I think they can do the by themselves.
Yeah.
Oh,
If
can
they-
they?
If they want to.
I don't understand, I'm not
No,
good at
no.
the technique.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I really wish that I could see what you wrote there, but
You
I
can see the thing.
really
Oh, no, we have a TV thing, don't we? Yes.
yeah, I mean,
Did this give you any thoughts or ideas or criticisms or?
sorry, for now, I really have no,
Sure. Okay, thanks, good
yeah,
to see you.
I will write it further later because
That's great, yes,
I'm
like I did with
sorry, I
your.
have to read it through to organize it again. They have a lot of, you're using a different term in architecture, so I'm not really
Yes.
sure if I understand this correctly. I'm sorry.
But you
This is
know,
more
also,
general rather than,
people in this group should never worry about making a mistake. Think of it more like jazz than classical music, you know? The mistakes make it alive
More interesting.
and
Yeah.
more interesting. You're a jazz fan, I
That's
see.
original, actually, when you make mistakes.
Yes, yes. And that's, and somehow a mistake actually can express, you know, like the Lacanian term and the Freudian idea of the return of the repressed. Something is buried and the mistake actually might have a weird truth in it somehow, because it's escaping in this little crack, you know. Shingo, did you have a second question, I think, or?
May I, or maybe, I can go after somebody else on Zoom.
No, please go.
Come on.
No, I have lots
Come
of
on.
questions as usual.
Well,
Too
that's what,
many.
let's leap forward.
No, I have so many questions, I don't know where to begin. I mean, I'm not a philosopher, or I haven't had any academic, training in the field at all. And most of the words I learned here today, I mean, it is very hard to, really, so this theory, if I understand, is a very, because you said it's kind of a universal theory, is it? That you want to say that it's kind of a universal theory that you can apply it to either an individual or a society or a nation or whatever, right?
And in a
As a-
sense, the theory of the interpenetration of opposites, etc., somehow that has
No,
connection
I
with
mean
the
to say,
physical world too.
no, of course, no, what I mean to say is that, to apply this, we cannot, we have to have a context first, right?
Yes.
So, for example, am I going to apply this to an individual, or am I going to apply this to, I mean, because.
So for example, Hamada Sensei is currently working on virtual, online Zoom, etc., meeting groups of cyclists who are not cycling in the real streets, because that would be dangerous with a Zoom camera there. They're doing it in a room with these, fixed stationary bicycles. Okay, so what have we got then? We can just consider it. What are the ideal values? Fitness, not just that, society, actual sociality, human being together. Isn't that great? I mean, isn't that one of our great values? Friendship. Didn't we need that in COVID a lot, So these are the values. There might be others. You can, as they say in America, spitball. You can, what's the other word? Brainstorm. Ethic. What the rule? Well, any kind of online community, just like any kind of community, needs its rules. You probably can't join these groups, Hamada Sensei, is that correct? Without agreeing to some rules.
Yeah.
And there'll be naughty people, because it's the online world, I'll tell you, it's like that,
Yeah, some may cheat.
Cheating and harassment and all. And then the aesthetic. Okay, are you allowed to wear anything? Some things a bit too suggestive, a bit too sexy, a bit too bad for the vibe of the group. It might be legal, but it might not fit with the aesthetic that we're trying. But then again, if you give too many rules for that, you end up looking a bit fascistic, a bit too dominant, a bit too bureaucratic. You've got to find the balance. You probably can't get it all correct on day one. These things move from a small group to a bigger group, and then they get successful when they get it more or less right, but never perfect. Then you get the ethos arising. And what are the products? Well, the products are actual instantiations or materializations of meetings. The first meeting, 6 people in New York City. Second meeting, somebody in Bali's joined, and then Sydney, someone in Timbuktu and Kyoto. Oh, we're getting somewhere. We need more rules fast because we get the weirdos in or whatever, or some people just don't know. And then different cultures. Oh my gosh, we definitely need some kind of, rule making going on. What are the products? That's something to think about beyond the actual groups. Could you have manuals or online help systems about how to how we can lift each other up and support each other. You know, one product is actual health. I mean, that's a human health, human fitness is a product. So I think that's just quickly brainstorming one of my colleagues is research topics.
But I mean, given the, framework, I'm more interested in how we can apply it for humanity as a whole, right?
Of course.
So, probably that is one of the major, goals, right?
Like I said, when a society becomes sick, and I was talking about just walk through the supermarkets, walk through the convenience store, you see our gods reflected in your Pokemons and your Precure with the large breasts and the hypersexualized hips and so on, and the men with their bookender Power Rangers, and one of them is a bit more heroic and one of them is a sexual object, for example. Look at the ancients and the ancient Greeks and the Christians and the Muslims and different religions said icons in a sense are kind of a dangerous bad thing, but the people kind of want them. But you have the gods and the icons. Well, transferring it here, you have the real value and you have the stuff that we humans make. And that's like the gods and that's like the
My
icons.
question is the ideal value for humanity, right?
Hmm.
In that case, the ideal value, is it, defined by humans
Well,
or not?
I mean, I hope we're not going to argue about whether truth, goodness and beauty are ideal values. I mean, I hope we all agree that they are.
No, I mean, that's absolutely fine, but is that all, That's
I
also
mean, no,
right?
no.
It keeps, we can add more and more words.
I mean, Ludwig Wittgenstein said that philosophy, he imagined an ideal form of philosophy where people get together around a table or in a walk or whatever. Somebody says one thing and we don't say the next sentence until we all agree on that or we all work out how to change that sentence. And then we think of the next thing to say, we can.
No, I agree to that.
Yeah,
No,
diverse
no,
people to
but
think of
what I mean
values.
to say is, if you're talking about whole of humanity,
Hmm.
then there is not 2 or 3 or 4 different kind of ideal values. There could be only one, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah.
if you're talking about truth, beauty,
Yeah.
and whatever, and so on and
Yeah.
so on, they are all different expressions of the same ideal, right?
Hmm.
But it's all part of the whole. It's not the actual ideal itself, in my imagination, right?
I think you're talking about pluralism versus monism. So,
I have no idea.
Well, for example,
Word, yeah.
might there be a Hindu, Hindu is actually more than one religion, it's a conflation of many, but just for the ease of talking quickly, might there be a Hindu set of ideal values and a Judeo-Christian one and a Muslim
No,
one
but then
and a Shinto? But actually,
No,
as humans,
No,
we
it
ought
doesn't
to
matter.
believe that there is one.
no, absolutely. I mean, what I'm talking about is much above that, right? It's not about religion or,
But cultures and nations and,
No, I mean, just put the whole of humanity,
yeah,
right? Simply because we're all humans, that's all. That's the
Yeah.
only thing, the common denominator.
yes,
And the ideal value that we talked about, for example, if you're applying for different contexts, like, individuals or nations and so on, it can change, right?
Yes.
The ideal for what Japanese society is very different from what is ideal for another society and so on, right? These are all something that is very
And I would add that the-
arbitrary. These
and I
are
would
all
add-
man-made.
and I
These
would
are all-
add that they're all, if you can show me a society, I'll tell you that it's broken without even looking at it, so I'll predict it.
No, I mean to say, we have to probably, test this theory
Hmm.
on a, that is, for example, if we apply for various things, right? I mean,
Yes.
smaller entities,
Yes,
then it's very subjective,
right.
it's not objective, right? I can always claim my idea is better,
Hmm.
or I can bring
Yes.
some points to prove that this
Yes,
is correct.
I know what you're saying, so
But
test
we
it.
have to,
So,
we have to go beyond this.
so Hemant, we can do thought experiments and historically based thought experiments. For example, you can look at the instantiations of, sort of Marxist communism in the past, where ideal value has been cut off, or Nazi Germany, where the freedom of the individual has been cut off and the aesthetic is given. It must be German, kind of romantic, about the hills and the Blut und Boden, the blood and the soil, with the fair hair and the pure Nazi, Aryan blood, etc. And that becomes, because you, in a sense, cut off one leg and cut off the head, you get a system of rules that is hypertrophied, as you say in biology. It's massively enlarged and it cripples everything else and it's doomed to failure. Sadly, it took, 9 million deaths for it to fail within, 6 or 7 or 8 years or 10 years or something. There are plenty of, historical examples that we can look at. Communism and Nazism and fascism are examples.
Slightly different. I mean, if you want to, you look at the past, you look back, and you try to fit the data into this construct, that we can always do, in some way or the other. But
Right,
what I'm saying is looking forward.
prediction, yeah.
Yeah, not prediction,
Mm.
but truly understanding the existence, right?
Mm.
It's not about what has happened or what's going to happen,
Mm.
but does it fit to the reality now, right?
Mhm.
So, in that, because if it fits now, it will fit everywhere.
Well, that's the reflection, well, possibly, unless we're living in a unique moment, but which is unlikely. But in that sense, I mean, in a generic, but I mean, that's the period that follows, the schema. It's not, I wouldn't even call it a theory exactly, although it does have a kind of theory inherent within it. The next period is the period of reflection.
So my major concern, is it, time bound?
No. I mean,
Yeah, if it
constructing.
is not time bound, then we don't have to worry whether it's past or future
Yeah.
or present, right?
Mm.
That's the point.
Mhm.
So, I have too many things going on in my head, so,
Uh,
yeah, please go
Okay,
ahead.
may I just,
Mm.
I'm sorry,
Mm.
if I interrupt, but actually, I was really thinking about the same things as Professor Nuthala Pati was putting here. So summing up what you have been talking about, then it must be, I can guess, that some gradation or some, the degrees about the
Dialectic
so-called
movements.
dialectic values. Because I was also thinking or wondering if so-called the ideal values could be different with cultures or traditions. And now, maybe I can give you a example of a broken society. Broken society, unquote. This is what you told, you said, okay? And drawing on the all those issues and things about book banning in the United States. Book
Yeah.
banning.
In the USA as
Also-
well as in Nazi Germany, yeah.
So all those, superb examples of literature, they are just eliminated from the book libraries or.
Is it from history? Like George Orwell said, that's an unperson,
Yeah,
that's an
that's
unbook.
really true.
Mm.
But, those who are for this book banning, they have their own
Values,
ideologies.
yeah.
And so I remember, so far as I remember, you did not use the word politics.
Yes, that's correct, how interesting, yes.
Yeah, how interesting
And
is.
how almost impossible to talk about all of this without bringing it in. Yeah.
So this can be connected to, so I don't want to be, just putting out something political.
Yes,
But it's all about politics sometimes,
Yes,
but, those kids at school, they are just more like indifferent, we can just read them.
Yes.
As, whatever we like, whatever all those parents might say.
Yeah.
And so this kind of system,
Mm.
probably maybe challenging the, single one universal idea of value. So maybe you can.
So I mean, yeah, so your question's touching on relativism, obviously, cultural and social relativism. I mean, I'm gonna give you a bit of my inclination, my tendency, my own politics, as it were, in answering that as a human individual, and say that my inclination in those issues, those politically charged issues, is to say that the crippling or the removal or the banning of a work of art or a work of science, in the past in the USA, Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species and The Descent of Man have been banned. The removal of knowledge is obviously retrograde, it's a step backwards, and the removal of art is, according to the ethos, as it were, of this whole pentadic self, you're cutting off one of the limbs of your human expressivity. You are a priori. What does that mean? It means you are doomed. If you hamper aesthetic and freedom and knowledge will be on this side, the ethic probably. But if you hamper either of these limbs, as it were, the arms of the mind, as it were, then you're doomed to be crippled, and you're doomed to cripple your children. And, I mean, that's politically charged. I'm passionate about that, as we all are, as a liberal, you know, as somebody who stands for freedom. But I'm not a liberal who is against rules. I've argued this whole time that the ethic is an equal and opposite number and a very valued member of the aesthetic. Thank you very much. I mean, did you want to sort of riff further on that? I mean, relativism, I think, sometimes comes into your work, and it's something very interesting. Of course, different societies have different icons that they revere, but are they not somehow? And here's I'm inclined to universalism. Are they not just different coloured diffractions or suffusings of the one true white light, as it were, of ideal value, you know? The different colours that we get in Shinto or Buddhism, or the Sioux, or, you know, the Algonquin, or, you know, the Incans and the Mayans. Well, I'm not inclined to think there are 87 or 246 actual different versions of ideal value. No, there are that many different manifestations in human history of it, but they're all dim, unbright, or imperfect diffusions of ideal value, and we colour it with our own, as it were, flesh and clothes and practices, and geography even might reflect into that, you know. But the ideal value is that which cannot be conceived, cannot be imagined, it's ungraspable. Therefore, to say that we have an ideal value of Nazism or an ideal value of the Mayans or the Incans or the Algonquin is to miss the point there, to say, no, these are expressions of ideal value. You can't actually put ideal value on a piece of paper or in a temple. The best expression of it is an emptiness, as a lot of the Hindus and the Buddhists knew in some way. That's one, you know, the empty spot. You know, the temple for the unknown God, as it were.
Somebody else? Or
Anybody else really more? Anybody online want to say anything, or?
anybody?
Maybe we have time for one or two more questions, and then we can sort of close down the meeting. And if anybody else has more time, I'd like to get onto any other business about the future of this society, future speakers, etc., rather than just. But if there's a burning question, burning.
Yeah.
Not burning.
Yeah.
Burning question.
Yeah, I have so many more. I'll talk to you later also in person.
Okay.
But it feels like, you know, for example, if we are talking about, you know, collective, you know, human, you know, if you apply this, right? For example, if you take a baby, right? Just born,
Yeah.
newborn, right?
Yeah.
And newborn doesn't know ethics. Newborn doesn't know aesthetic.
Well, it has desires straight away.
Right.
It wants to suck. It wants to cuddle.
Right.
It
No.
wants to-
Just
be
the
hugged.
newborn. Right. No,
It wants to scream.
you know, that's biological need, yes.
Yeah, but that's part of aesthetic.
That's right. No, there is some aesthetic perhaps, right? But the point is, I mean, talking very ideally, right? Very ideally, so the ideal value that you said, which is inconceivable, and as you said, all the truth and beauty and all are ways of expression of the ideal value. And the very simplistic way, when I look at that scheme right now, what occurs to my mind is that, for example, if we cut off the rest of the four of them, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You mean cut off 5?
No, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of them.
Cut off. Okay, and you've just got ideal value, just
Right.
as it were the head, the
Right.
mind, the
So,
spirit.
I mean, that's the goal, right? I mean, we are moving towards that.
Yes,
it?
yes and no, yes and no. Actually, okay, there's an ancient idea. It comes from, oh my mind. It comes from, what's it called? The Talmud, not the Talmud. What's that system? The Kabbalah, I think, the Jewish system. It's a kind of an esoteric system, okay? And this is a gloss, and I'm going to get something wrong here. But there's a sense of 2 drives. And some people have interpreted it as the spiritual quest. Some even call it the Christ quest. So, you know, Christ, not necessarily Jesus Christ, because it's a Jewish system, but Christ as in the Messiah, you know, of rising towards the spirit of everything that you do. And then you get so thrilled with that intellectual fire that you take your phoenix wings and cut off all your connections with the earth. You don't even say goodbye, mother, thank you. You just fly off into the spheres and you become higher than Michelangelo and Da Vinci and, you know, and you cut off your ear and whatnot, and you just go high, and you're high as a kite. You've even possibly even left the earth, Gaia, your whole mother, right? Now, there's something that the Kabbalah people understood. There's something cruel about the spiritual quest. It's not, yeah, your yogi can sit in the cave for 50 years, but maybe he doesn't have a child that needs nourishing or something like that. But you see, so also it's the roots. So actually, for me, the ideal is the flower. Think of your sakura because it's a nice time for that now. But that needs the roots to find stability. Roots don't just nourish, they get stability and they wrap around what they can and give strength to the whole. And you have the boughs of the tree and the limbs coming out in your ethic and your aesthetic. And the whole thing is actually a tree. So no, I wouldn't quite say, although I'm inclined, but my inclination is not my own need. You know, I'm inclined to go for the spiritual quest, as it were, and the intellectual quest. But the whole is the ideal.
So what I mean to say.
Humanity is more than heaven, is one way of putting it.
Right. So what I mean to say is that this ideal value that we are striving for example,
In a way.
Is already there. Okay?
If there was no earth and no
No.
humans, it would still be there in
Well,
one way of
exactly,
thinking.
right? Exactly, right?
Yeah, as the
So
mathematicians
it has
might
nothing to
say.
do with the rest of the things, right? The ideal value has truly no connection
It
to
doesn't need
ethics
us.
or aesthetic or
Mm.
any of the things that you
It
mentioned.
doesn't need you, but you need it.
Exactly,
Mm.
right? So I'm trying to connect to it, right?
Yeah,
Rather. So,
I'm with you, brother.
so in that sense, it's already there,
Mhm.
okay? And
Yes.
because of the existence of ethics, aesthetics and products and ethos and so on,
Mm.
we are not able to see it.
Kind of. I mean, sometimes our feet are too much in the mud. We need that damn mud. I'm not denigrating
No,
it.
so
But if we're
this
too much in the
system-
mud,
This
we
system
should
is
be looking
very,
at the stars more often.
this system is useful for everyday life, perhaps.
I think so.
To
too.
keep or to sustain the life, right?
Mhm.
But it doesn't really help to go beyond that.
I think,
Isn't it?
well, I don't
The
know.
aesthetics and ethics is just to sustain the society,
Well,
right?
you can
I
think of
mean,
it like,
if you don't have ethics at all, we'll kill each other and die.
you
The
can
society
think of
will
it like,
disappear.
you can think
But
of
at
it
the
like,
same time, if it will be too fascistic, as you said, then aesthetics will come in and then counterbalance and say, okay, there is still some happiness in, people's, heads, right?
you can
So-
think of it like Arjuna's bow.
Mhm.
And the two poles are so, the longer the bow, the further apart they are, the more strength it has. Just like electricity, the greater the potential difference, the more power you generate. And Arjuna, he met with one of the gods. Was it Shiva or Krishna, or who did he meet with on the?
Who?
Arjuna, isn't it one of the old ancient?
Yes, exactly.
Mhm. And he had a bow. Well, think of it. You pull the poles closer together.
Mhm.
The rule
Shiva's bow.
and the freedom.
Shiva's bow, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, thank you.
The bow itself was Shiva's, yeah.
But Shiva's bow. Okay, thank you. And did he fire it, Arjuna?
He broke it.
Well,
Nobody could lift it. but
I am
he
a
lifted it.
prayer in your hands, Lord. Stretch me even if I break. That's one of Nikos Kazantzaki's 3 prayers. And then, this can be shaped into people who want more spirituality or ideality in their lives, a way, as it were, of
I'm
firing
very
the
sorry. That
arrow.
was Rama, not Arjuna.
Ah,
I'm
Rama
extremely sorry. No. I'm saying the bow
was Rama.
no. That was Shiva,
Yeah.
but bow was broken by Rama. It was in different epic than not Mahabharata. Arjuna is in Mahabharata.
Right, Rama
Yeah.
broke it. Thank you. I'll ask you more about that later because that just occurred to me. There's a sense, it's a kind of mythos. I mean, this is meant to be a social theory. It's not meant to be a myth. But there's a mythical way of interpreting it as bringing together the opposite sides of a bow in order to launch the arrow into the ideality or the stratosphere of, rarefied ideas or spirit or high values, that sort of thing. And I mean, for my life, I see that as inherently practical, as deeply practical, so.
So if we just, individually, if we just not fight, to say, go beyond these,
Transcend.
aesthetics, transcend, then we don't have to do anything else because what is left is just ideal, right? What we need to do is just break these, not try to go somewhere.
Yeah, and my
You understand?
response always to that is we have a duty and a responsibility,
Yeah,
and hopefully
yeah.
love for these physical stuff. So we're not on a Messiah quest where we're trying to get to the heavens only and live there and say goodbye to the earth.
No.
we're actually different
So that
from
is-
the angels in
That's
heaven, as it
exactly,
were, who
so
are
that's
always.
exactly, that is exactly
Mm.
the need, because, you know, how you live in this world
Yes,
and don't do anything different, right?
yes.
So the rules, the ethics that I'm talking about to transcend is not outwardly, but rather inwardly.
Mhm.
And the moment you break those in yourself, right?
Mm.
Then everything else is still the same, but you are not anymore,
Right.
isn't it?
Mhm.
So it's
Yes.
just nothing to do with outside.
Well.
Possibly, although I would object, because there's a lot of materiality here. But I would like to say one thing, partly to answer, whose question was it, Ferenc Hemans, about what is the test of a theory in the humanities? Well, actually, generativity of discussion and keeping the dialectic going is part of it. And I think we've had a bit of that here. So if nothing else, it's generative of talk and thought. But I think perhaps we can stop there. I want to thank very much to the people, Sayako Yoshikawa, Yuichiro Yokoyama, and Yoshiki Nakamura. Thanks for joining online. I apologize if you haven't been able to talk, if we've locked you out somehow. I'm not a very expert person on Zoom, but we're going to close the meeting now because we're now just going to talk about society business for a little bit. So,
Yokoyama is on screen.
so thank you very much. And I suppose there's a chat coming up. I don't know how we can read that.
Just
Yuichiro,
That's
maybe, Yuichiro has something to say.
okay, if you can ask. Ryu,
No, I just say thank you for your presentation.
this is by the way, this is Dr. Ryuichiro Yokoyama, who recently passed his PhD thesis on John Donne, the metaphysical poet. So that's coming together of metaphysics and literature. And he's also mine and Shingo's former student from Shimodai. So, and he's now got an academic job at, is it Meikai University? Meikai?
Yes, in Chiba Prefecture.
But he's still a member of this Living Ideas group, so thank God to Zoom. So, yes, Ryu, you wanted to have a question or a comment?
No, I just said thank you for your presentation.
Great, great. Okay, all the best, yes, and keep in touch, and hopefully you can present to us, whether in person or by Zoom.